Hi, I'm Daniel. I work for 432 Presents as the head booker for the Hug and Pint. We also promote over 600 shows a year across Scotland and sometimes other parts of the UK, and book for various festivals such as Doing the Rabbit Hole, Edinburgh International Festival, the Fringe, the Great Western, and the Great Eastern Festivals.
Excellent. So we'll start at the beginning. So how did your journey into the music industry actually begin?
So it was actually kind of like an accident almost. I was in a band a few years ago, which will remain unnamed. 'Cause no one needs to find out about that. And we were putting on a single launch that was meant to be at the Record Factory, and it was meant to be an in-house promotion. And about 3 or 4 weeks before the show, I'd noticed, nothing had been announced. There was no publication anywhere, and the guy who was meant to be promoting the show told me that it was actually a hire. I sent him the information we'd agreed before, how it wasn't going to be a hire and how there were fees and everything agreed. So from then, I decided to start like a little DIY venture to put on that show and kind of see how that went and what happened afterwards. Turns out I really enjoy promoting shows and booking bands. So that was just something I continue to do through working in various venues and promoting shows on different levels. I got a job in broadcast, and then from then met a bunch of different tour managers, artists, different promoters, and things, and managed to worm my way into a job at PCL. Since then, I've promoted a bunch of shows around Glasgow, like Stag and Dagger Festival, and that. And recently, in the past year, well, not recently, in the past year and a half, I've moved over to 432 Presents, where I've become the head booker of the Hug, doing a bunch of different festivals that were aforementioned in the introduction. And now we're here.
Excellent. So did you complete any formal education in relation to the music industry?
No, not in relation to music, but I did study accountancy for 2 years, nearly 2 years anyway. And then, yeah, everything else I've picked up from then has just been through, you know, trial and error and just learning things from different people and just building my knowledge as I've gone.
Yeah. I suppose that's how a lot of these things in the music industry do happen. So
Mm.
obviously you're in such a position and you didn't actually really have to go to uni to get there. Um, so at the time, there are obviously a lot of great music business courses in Scotland, and obviously I've been through education right up until master's level, to be honest. But again, like there's a lot of people like yourself in the industry that don't have to do it. You learn on the job, and that is also another thing that's really encouraged. Obviously, even when you're at uni, go do stuff out with uni. Um, so it can be quite a
Exactly.
lot.
Broaden your skills, get your extracurricular stuff in order. Funnily enough, I did actually go to 2 interviews. I can't remember which colleges they were when I first moved down here. One to do music business, one to do music production. And
Mm-hmm.
I was told I wasn't what they were looking for.
Wow.
Yeah,
Um, how does that work? Hey.
I don't know. Like I genuinely thinking back on that now, I find it really funny. But yeah, I was never good in education anyway, so it kind of works out better for me this way, I guess.
I suppose it just shows that it's not the be all end all either. It's totally fine.
Exactly.
That's actually really funny. Um, wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
I also got an F in standard grade music.
wow.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's focus in on maybe some of the specific things that you and areas that you've been sort of working in the music industry. Like, so what are the sort of various job areas that you have experience in when it comes to music? Because again, you're not you wear many hats in music.
Yeah, it's a strange one because what you do in the office varies from day to day, and what you do in a venue in terms of just general practice and what happens when a band comes in will just change depending on what's going on around it. Cool. Yeah. So I've got a personal license, so I'm able to run and set up bars and have like, staff members work under me, um, and put together shows and stuff. Really out with putting together shows and doing all the things you would have to do encompassing a gig, not that much. Like really what I specialize in doing is like booking and production, getting marketing and ticketing and everything sorted out. So really what you would be involved in an actual show opposed to around about that.
I suppose artist management as well.
I tried for a while. It turns out just I was too busy with booking to do all of the other like
Mhm.
A&R and PR stuff that you had to do as a manager. So really my management roles were kind of like personal bookers for bands, which was weird, and just working and building relationships with other promoters that I usually wouldn't speak to because obviously we're fighting for not only dates at other venues but acts as well,
Hmm.
because we all want to be promoting, that cool new band. Um, so yeah, building relationships with people that I wouldn't usually work with and being able to kind of have, as we mentioned earlier, like a transactional kind of relationship with them, where it's like, if you help me get my act on your stage, I'll help you get your act on my stage,
Yeah.
and we can work through that way.
Yeah, which is a cool thing. Obviously, you mentioned the personal licensing. That's really interesting because that does mean you could put on a gig anywhere you'd like, anywhere
Yeah,
sort of up and put on a bar to obviously make money, which is cool. And again, this is a skill that you picked up out with the music industry that you can then go ahead and apply, which is
exactly. It's
brilliant.
something I picked up to do purely to get closer to the music industry. Like I worked in a Wetherspoons like when I first moved down here for a little bit. But really it wasn't until I was working in broadcast and like having to deal with the bands and being like the guy who was downstairs in the venue and like having to kind of run that bar by myself and just get used to not really having anyone there that could back me up.
Hmm.
Which then gives you, the confidence to deal with not only customers, but like the bands and their managers. And then from then you just continuously build yourself to be able to put yourself in these situations and have a comfortable conversation and like build a rapport with someone that you've never met and that you're kind of intimidated by, but try really hard to not show it.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. Particularly when you are obviously working within a venue, you are a representative of the venue and also the promotions company you're working for. And from my perspective, when I was working as an artist manager, like there'd be times that I'd be like, you know what, I'm gonna take this gig that was offered by this promoter because I know the guy who sent me this and I like him and it will help him out if we do the show and it helps us out that he's given us this show, like let's do it, why not? Oh yeah, that's a show offer from this guy that I know that's like a friend almost. That's all this industry is. It's friends upon
Yeah,
friends, but professionally.
exactly. Like you're you're gonna work with the people you trust the most. Firstly to not fuck up, to not mess about with your act, and to give them the best opportunities that you can offer that will help their development.
Yeah.
And then, to do the best you can with like your budgeting and that, and make sure of everything is as transparent as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
And if you don't have, that sturdy relationship with the manager or the agent or the band themselves, they're gonna be working with other people and they might not be getting as good like a strategy as they could be getting with someone that they've got a really tight relationship with.
Yeah.
So it's a bit buddy buddy, but it kind of makes sense why it is that way. Because your team is kind of your family. Like you're on the road with them for potentially 9 months of the year. So you've got to be really trusting the people you're around and going to be visiting on your tours.
I mean, that's exactly it. And it does fall into the thing of like, you help me, I help you, but not
Mhm.
in a bad way because we both want the best outcome and we don't want anyone to, lose any money or lose any sort of shows out with this. I always feel like sometimes the common misconceptions of the industries are that, we're all constantly after each other's throats, but actually we're all working as hard as we can to make sure that I get a good deal of this, you get a good deal of this, and we're all happy.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, as well, people think that like the industry side or the corporate side of the music industry is like all about money. But you've got to remember like that money doesn't come anywhere without a room full of people who are really buzzed to go see this band. So like it's all built from passion, and that money eventually goes back into creating larger events and creating more culture essentially for that area and
Hmm.
for whatever genre it's in.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Okay, so we're gonna strip back down to basics. How do you go about booking bands for your venue and for the promotions company you work for?
So the way I do it now is very different to the way that I started off doing it. Obviously now, because I don't have to, have my own infrastructure of the way I do things, there's a company with that set out, and we have a production team and we have a marketing team and we have a ticketing team, which is amazing. But I think probably the best way to describe it would be how I did it, like in a more DIY format,
Mhm.
because it helps to kind of understand like the motion of going through a show entirely and how to build like a lineup.
Yeah.
So I kind of get like a notepad out and write down 5 or 6 bands that I'd really want to, play a lineup. And then find what venues I thought would be most appropriate to those genres. Because not every band works in every venue. Kind of like how all jacuzzis are hot tubs, but not how all hot tubs are jacuzzis.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing that and then getting in touch with the venues to see what dates they have available, trying to find the best one, ideally a Friday or Saturday, and then checking that with the bands, seeing who is available, and then, creating your budget for the show. So you get the costings for the venue, you'll get how much you'd be wanting to spend on posters. If anyone is going to be doing any DIY shows who's watching this, go to Just Great Print in Scotland. They do really cheap prices and they're really good quality.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, get all of your costings together, how much you might be looking to spend on rider for the bands, which is kind of like the snacks and drinks there in the green room and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then from then you can kind of not guesstimate, but kind of guesstimate how many people you think you'd be able to drive down to the show, whether it's like 50 or hundreds, and then you can kind of base the ticket price off that. And for smaller developmental shows, I always kind of found that £5 to £7 max is the best way to do it, because your pals have got a spare fiver kicking about, and if not, then don't turn them away for having a lack of funds. Having more people in the room is better than having less people in the room if you can fit them. And yeah, from then, once you get your lineup sorted and confirmed and you've agreed a deal with all of the bands, then you can announce your show, get the Facebook event live, make sure that all of the information is really clearly there, and don't do what I do. What I did on my first show is misname the venue. Instead of the Record Factory, it was the Music Factory, and that is honestly the truth.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It was still quite busy though, surprisingly enough.
I mean,
Um,
I suppose we've all been there. We've all had some shockers.
yeah, made some very funny mistakes over the years, but nothing that hasn't been fixed. Yeah, so once you've got everything announced, you've got your event up, you've got your ticket links live on whatever ticketing sites you use. There's loads of free ones out there, whether it's Music.ly or C Tickets or Eventbrite, which you can also link to your Facebook events to make it more
Mm-hmm.
direct for people to buy tickets. Because the less clicks to get someone to do something, the better. Yeah, from then you can speak to all of the bands, find out what their tech spec is, which in much easier terms is how many vocals the band use, how many, guitar, bass, drums, basically what the makeup of the band is, if they need anything special. And then as bands become more developed and play larger venues with bigger sound engineers, they'll have like channel lists for all of their instruments, which I don't understand enough about tech to explain, but someone else can.
The sound
Um,
engineer, when you send them an email with this.
exactly. They'll know what they're seeing, but I don't. Yeah, so once you have all of the band's information, then you send that across to the venue so they know what's happening, and then promote the hell out of it. Tell as many people as you can, get it plastered up everywhere in the most time and money efficient ways as you can, because your time is also a cost in this, even though it doesn't feel like it, because it's something you want to do. Yeah, and then on the day of the show, you're kind of like the point of reference for the band as they come in, welcome them, show them where everything is in the venue. If they haven't been there before, if they have been there before, part of your job's done. And then just kind of make sure the day runs smoothly, answer everyone's questions, point people in the right direction if you can. If not, point them towards a staff member who can. People are usually happy to help, and no one minds if you don't know an answer. Everyone doesn't know something sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Um,
Uh, yeah.
I was gonna ask, so like when you're obviously putting on like a DIY show yourself, like when should you start promoting the event?
It it really depends on the type of crowd you're hitting. Because if you're hitting more of like an art rock crowd, you can release the event 2 or 3 weeks beforehand and still get a crowd, because with that genre, it seems like people tend to decide like on the night whether they're going to go to the gig or not.
Mm-hmm.
So your ticket sales will usually be quite low, but the attendance will always be fairly high. It's a really weird one. Whereas some shows you need to announce it like a month or two beforehand and make sure it's hitting like the right groups with your targeted ads to get people down to it. But I usually like to do a month and a week. So about 5 weeks is the latest I would put a show on sale before it happened, just because then it's out there for enough time for people to be speaking about it, but not for too long for other things to take over. So when you're pushing it and the bands are pushing it, and maybe someone's getting a song released a few weeks before the show, then there's just that momentum to build and it can't really peak and die off.
Mm-hmm.
But every gig is different.
That's the
Yeah,
fun of
exactly.
booking, I suppose. Yeah, now that you come to mention it, I probably have been quite guilty of in that weird way when a show is announced like 2 months, 3 months in advance. I kind of think, yeah, I'll go, but then I forget about it. And next thing you know, the time comes around and I've re remembered. And I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I want to go now because I've just remembered about this. But if I've got
100%.
2, 3 weeks, I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to go. Or again, like you said, on the night, maybe more on the night. I'm like, well, this is on. Do you want to go? Like, yeah, let's go.
On the night is always a fun way to do things and just like
Yeah.
dot about different places as much as you can.
Yeah, which is really cool. And again, like you said, obviously understanding your venue is important because from my example, when I was working with Last Night from Glasgow and we were organising 3 cities, 3 bands,
Mhm.
3 nights tour.
That
Um,
the domiciles one.
yeah, there's the domiciles, L Space, and oh no, what they call cloth. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So obviously we are gonna go ahead and book um what's that venue in Dundee? The small one, not
The
church.
church,
No, smaller.
the one
Gin.
that's Ginger Jesus that runs it. That
Oh,
is the promotions company, not a nickname, by the way.
yeah.
Um,
The ginger one. Is it Jimmy's? Is it
Jimmy's Basement or something like that.
something
Or
like
is it
that?
Henry's Cellar? No, Henry's
Oh,
is
that's in
Edinburgh,
Edinburgh.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's a small venue. I remember I was sending over obviously tech specs to see it's because obviously we're getting ready for these bands to go ahead and play this venue, and then it turns out that this stage and also the desk could not support the band. Like there's not enough channels, there was not enough space for domiciles who had massive like organs and guitars and
Mm.
the drum kit as well. It just seemed impossible. And obviously I think it was like a few weeks before the show, and we did obviously the promoter contacted us and we contacted them saying just can't do it, we can't accommodate it, I'm so sorry. I think ironically, I think it might have been the band that actually booked the venue for some strange reason, and nobody really realized until it was like, okay, the show's coming up, we can't do it there. And that's totally cool. It's just one of those things. But luckily we did catch that. So I think it's important to understand what venue you're playing in, because not every single
For sure.
small venue is going to have the
And
specs.
also getting things done in a timely manner. If you didn't see those tech specs a few weeks beforehand, it could have been a real struggle to find another spot.
Yeah, and on the night as well. Can you imagine on the night? I mean, things do go wrong in the night, and I understand that, but yeah, I suppose when it comes to booking shows and putting events on, people really don't realize how far in advance things are booked and planned, the amount of, behind the scenes work that does go into things.
Oh, 100%. I mean, with a lot of like international tours, they can be booked months to potentially a year in advance and just not be on sale, just be sitting there waiting until that big thing happens and then, it gets mixed.
And sometimes things get cancelled as well. So I like to assume I'd like to not assume something's happening until it's already happened. I feel like
Yeah.
that mindset's been really good for dealing with things in the music industry because things can go wrong.
100%. I mean, things change all the time. My like motto kind of thing is like nothing set in stone until it's on sale. Because
Yeah.
I have had moments where, I've booked a band I've been really excited about, not known that that band has changed agents, and then, the show pops up in another venue, and I'm none the wiser. I think we've got the show, and then find out, someone else is promoting it.
Is it like heartbreak?
It's actually really heartbreaking because I mean, as I mentioned before, like everyone who works in the industry is like incredibly passionate about what they do, and I can very happily say 95 out of 100 of the bands that I promote and book, like I'm a massive fan of, and I will do as much of as I can to help their development, not only in Glasgow but across the whole of Scotland as much as I can. And yeah, when you lose an act to someone else, it stinks. It's a sad one, choke up a little bit.
Oh, the one that got away.
Exactly.
Um, so so you obviously work in the music venue. You work at the Hug and Pint in Glasgow.
Mm.
So what are some of the normal day-to-day tasks you actually do within a music venue?
So in terms of what I do in the venue, I generally go in and just kind of make sure the place is like, all right, we've got all of the right posters up, nothing is kind of wrong or, particularly messed up. Like, because I was a bar manager for about a year and a half as well, like I've got a fairly decent knowledge of like how things should be run in the bar side as well as like, in the venue. So if there's ever like someone covering a shift or something or someone's alone, like I'll be able to help them out and let them know what's going on. But yeah, generally in terms of the venue and gigs, it's about like liaising with the bands. Mainly, you want to be that friendly face for bands and punters to come and feel like at home and like welcome in the venue, because no one wants to go to a gig and feel like they're in someone else's space. You want to feel like not as in like not in someone else's, like the person you're next to, but like you're not free to kind of enjoy yourself in that space is what I meant. So just making sure like everyone's comfortable as they come into the venue, making sure the show's able to run, like the green room is nice and clean for the bands. When they arrive, they're offered like a tea or a coffee or whatever. Making sure everything can run effectively, essentially. I don't really know how to go into specific things because everything changes every day, especially within venues when you've got not only local but touring acts coming in, and you've got potentially reps in sometimes as well. So the bar staff will have to liaise with the reps, who will then liaise with the band. So there's loads of different people who are involved who have different roles.
Yeah, and also making sure the sound engineer is there and knows and is on time
Yeah.
as
And
well.
we thankfully got, an amazing staff of, I think there's 15 engineers
Oh
that
wow.
work across like all the Hug and Pint stuff and all the 432 things. When we
Mhm.
had the Blue Arrow, obviously we needed potentially 14 a week to be working every show.
Wow.
Mm.
That's a lot of staff members and a lot of people involved in, a live gig, and that's not even the audience.
Yeah, I can probably send you the photo actually, but there's a photo when we were deciding what to do in regards to keeping the Hug and Pint open or shutting it to the public when COVID first started.
Hmm.
And I didn't even realize how many staff members were like working amongst 432, the Hug and Pint, and all the other festivals and stuff we do. There
Yeah.
was probably about 40 to 50 people in the room minimum.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a lot of people for obviously one of the smallest kind of venues we have in Glasgow.
exactly.
It's small, but also one of those venues. Like I feel whenever you're starting out with a band or an artist, you always go right. We're starting at the Hug and Pint, the sort of capacity. So I do almost feel like it's a rite of passage playing your one of your first gigs within the Hug and Pint with obviously 432.
Exactly. I mean, selling out the Hug is like, I think it's the nicest small venue I've been into that's nice even when it's sold out.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone's still got a bit of space, there's nice places to stand, everyone's got a good sight line, and it's just, a nice wholesome spot. You
And
get
the
some
food's good.
tempeh upstairs before the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I do miss fucking pint. I do. Probably as much as you do. Maybe a little bit less. Um. Okay. So actually, well, to be fair, we should probably segue into So how did COVID-19 affect your job?
And massively, I mean, when it really kicked off at the start of March, and we could kind of start to see the effects rolling in, and kind of not only the government, but like the public perception being like, oh, okay, this is like a really serious thing that's going to massively affect our lives, potentially for the next few months, potentially for, X amount of time until it ends. So it was weird at the start because we were speaking with agents and venues being like, how do you feel about this, and getting everyone's perception of it, and starting to decide like which particular shows would be at higher risks than other ones.
Mm-hmm.
um so started to maybe look at shows where people could be like moshing a bit more or whatever. And then within a week, I think it went from everyone kind of feeling out the situation to every email I got being a show being cancelled, being a tour being cancelled, or like a venue shutting and deciding that, it wasn't worth the risk to be open, which at the time felt like a lot. But obviously, in hindsight now, 100% the right decision from
Yeah.
everyone. If we could have done it sooner, we should have, but we didn't have the same understanding then as we did now.
No.
Um, but yeah, I think though it was the 17th of March, which was just the day we decided to close the office and work from home, because everything was being cancelled. We were having things that we were working on being moved, and everyone just got this overwhelming feeling like this is going to be us for a while. Like it's probably best we do the responsible and safe thing, even though we haven't been formally told to do so, and just kind of pack down for now, start working from home, rescheduling stuff from home, doing all the promotion stuff, what needs to be done, informing customers of whatever information we're given by the government and kind of what we're pushing out for our shows, which was kind of the hardest thing to navigate, because you had people being told about shows like in May and June that were going to be getting cancelled. And then there were also shows in November that were also, a big risk because of where that band may have been touring beforehand and what the cases were like in those countries. If they were, American, that was just an instant red flag because of how hot America was for cases. Like, I think it's still 4,000 people a day are dying even now. Um, so yeah, it's not great in any case.
That's so
So for the
surreal.
it's thinking about it and like actually saying these things, like it's really wild. Because I don't think until afterwards we'll
Everything that's
fully
happened.
understand the full impact of what happened. Yeah. So really for the last 9 months, my job has been rescheduling shows, while trying to take the opportunities that I had in place beforehand, such as like a new showcase festival I was booking, which is a continuation from First Footing,
Mm-hmm.
which we had at the Hug and Pint in January this year. Weird. Um, yeah, I just realized that First Footing was like a year ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started working on moving that new festival to be first footing, and then taking some of the bands that were there before and merging those shows into different events and different ideas.
Mhm.
So there'll be a lot coming out in the new year that will explain that. And also just kind of moving all of the new stuff we were working on just into what we felt and what the information we were getting on the government and from Music Venues Trust, in terms of how things were looking for like the next 6 months to a year. So everyone kind of across the UK had almost the same idea of what was going to happen.
Yeah,
Obviously, Scotland, Ireland, Wales being different to England,
yeah.
and kind of forming their own path.
Hmm. Yeah, that's. I'm glad you're one of the sort of people that are still within a job, which is great
Me
to
too.
see. We have lots of people, acquaintances, that have ended up in all sorts of jobs across this. So it's not all doom and gloom, particularly within the live sector. But
For
yeah,
sure.
we just totally didn't expect it. And again, when you're saying sort of key days like the 17th of March, that's like so apocalyptic.
Yeah, exactly.
Happens, and obviously we're so many months ahead of that, and it's just I'm still a little bit reeling from it, to be honest. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's an interesting one, hearing it from a life promoter's perspective. Um,
Been
so
a weird change to going to like, I'd usually go to at least 7 or 8 gigs a week,
mhm.
and usually 4 or 5 across Friday, Saturdays alone. And then going from that to not being at a show in 9 months and 13 days
Wow,
is a very big adjustment.
yeah, I love how you're counting.
Oh no, I've got the date in front of me on my laptop.
Wow. Again, like we always keep saying, things will come back tenfold. It will be
Exactly.
the roaring 20s when it does. Um, you're talking about 8 gigs a week, you'll be at 16 because you
Oh
want to
yeah.
be out the house.
I mean, as well, how just oversaturated the market's going to be. We've had 9 months of people rescheduling stuff.
Oh my
Every
God.
venue is going to have a gig in it every night.
Yeah,
You know, like people don't have the option to not go to gigs. Like you're going to have to go to a gig. There's going to be too much on.
pretty much, which is probably one of the most exciting things ever.
Mhm.
Yeah, so 2021 will be our year.
Exactly.
So we'll circle back a little bit and maybe talk about, obviously you mentioned obviously you work in the venue and putting on DIY shows yourself. So how do you go on about putting on a festival?
So putting on a festival is a very different one. Obviously, because you mentioned, some of the people in the group are interested in the Great Western, I'll kind of keep this to a multi-venue festival. Also, conveniently, that's where I have the most expertise.
Excellent.
Um, with outdoor festivals, I've only been involved a little bit in the bookings and the production, so I can't really give too much of an insight. But multi-venue is my thing. So really, the best way to imagine it. Actually, I've got a prop.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, the best way to kind of think about a multi-venue festival is it being, multiple gigs in one day, because you've got the timings here across the whole festival for the whole day,
Yeah.
where it's all the different venues. But if you do that, that's just one gig,
Wow. Yeah.
and then it's just that repeated across various stages. So really what you're doing is kind of exactly what I mentioned before in how to put together a show, but you're cross-referencing that all from being one budget and one advance to being a festival budget and a festival advance. So you've still got to, for the Great Western, I got involved with 432 as they kind of had the idea, but they'd only just chosen the venues and they'd only just started booking. So fortunately, I was able to really get dug into it. And Brian Reynolds, the CEO of 432, kind of made the Great Western like my baby and my pet project. So
Excellent.
it's essentially like, we have this idea, here you go, like push it through. which was really exciting to get involved in. So the base idea of it was being a community festival based around the underused and really beautiful venues in the West End, based around
Mhm.
Great Western Road, which just are never really used for shows. Like the
Yeah.
Glue Factory and Webster's. Most people might know it as like Webster's Bar, but it's actually got a theatre and a small playhouse upstairs.
Mhm.
One that can hold 350 people, one that can hold 80.
Wow.
There's, the QMU right around the corner. There is the Doublet, um, and Mary Hill Community Central Halls, which is, obviously a town hall and community space at first, but Bell and Sebastian famously put on, 2 nights there back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it is one of Glasgow's best venues, even though some people might see it as a daycare centre.
Yeah.
It's great for bands. So yeah, just gathering all of the costs for that and putting it together and creating your festival budget, kind of just what you think the costs are for the venues and what you've gathered from there and what you might spend on marketing and that. Then from then on, you get to do what is the best bit of putting together a festival, which is essentially making your dream lineup. Um, which is, as it is, you pick the bands that firstly, we tend to do it off of the bands we promote and the ones we're excited about, because as well as being, an amazing experience and festival and a great thing for bands to play, it's also part of our developmental strategy and structure for bands.
Yeah.
So we'll look at things like the Great Western and the Great Eastern in Scotland, and then potentially bounce that off different festivals in England with other people we work with, and kind of work with the agent and different promoters and different festivals to make sure we can get the best output for the bands. Um, yeah, and once you start to build your dream lineup, you can then send out like little notes of interest to the agents and managers or the bands themselves and build your headliners. So you've got the main structure of the festival, and then build it down from there and just lock in the bands that you're really excited about. Um, the I'll mention something now before I continue about the budgeting as well. That you would have a big like fee number for all of the bands who are going to be playing the festival that you would be able to base from your costing and what you think a feasible ticket price would be. For a
Mhm.
multi-venue festival, it's usually somewhere between 25 and 32 pounds.
Yeah.
And from that, you can then split out that budget to all of the different stages and then create your stage budget, that you can get all of the acts on and make sure you've got not everything like financially stable, but
Mhm.
also it works in terms of venues bouncing off each other and that stage just working as a bill. Um, Yeah, so from then you'd want to gather all of the tech specs from the bands and the venues, put them into their own documents. So for a venue, you would have all of the different band tech specs, maybe any different stage changes or something that might happen if anyone has any special requests. And for all the bands, you would put together the venue tech spec, the information about the festival, when they would load in, what their time to do a line check is, because for festivals, no one gets a sound check except for that stage headliner.
Yeah.
The headliner and the first on gets a sound check. Everyone else gets a thing called a line check, which is essentially they go on stage 5 minutes early, play a little bit of their instrument, and do a bit of a song. And the sound engineer will just work it through the first song in the set, which sounds a lot more slapdash than it actually is. These people are still professionals and very good at their jobs.
And they
So
do
line
make sure
check is
your instruments are working and your levels are great, and they also obviously fix you during your performance. They don't just cool, you're good, bye, I'm away
Yeah,
for
exactly.
coffee.
Like they don't go out for a cigarette as soon as you
No.
start your first song.
No.
Yeah, once you've got your information for the venues together and your information for the bands together, you can send that out to everyone. You need obviously a team of people to work the door for all of the venues and make sure everyone who's coming in has their tickets. People to do the representative work on each stage for the venue. So they'll be liaising with the bands and making sure everyone gets on stage on time and everyone knows what they're doing. Um, and yeah, you've just kind of got to make sure you're as prepared as possible and kill it, you know, just do the
Hmm.
best you can.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just, do it. The most stressful part is probably the announcement process,
Yeah.
because you've got to make sure that everyone's got all the information they need, and some people will get slightly different information than others. For example, like the headlining bands on the festival will get the full lineup, and so will their agents and the venues under a thing called an embargo, which means until a certain date or time, that information can't be released and it needs to be kept confidential.
Yeah.
But the lower down bands or the local bands on the festival lineup might not get told that information until a few hours before the announcement, just to make sure everything's airtight and it doesn't leak. Which can be a very stressful part if you know you think everything's perfect with the poster and the artwork, and then you send it out and you realize that one act's name is spelt slightly wrong, but that's a new act who's working with one of the biggest agents in the UK, and you've got to sort out all of this really quickly and make sure no one's posting the wrong thing to make sure everyone's happy.
The stress. And there was me, um, briefly before we started this call talking about the fact that surely the announcement is, the least stressful part of running the whole thing. And you're like, oh no, it's not. Because obviously you spend months planning festivals and putting all this like work and stuff into prepping people. And I just assumed that because you do so much work before and then you do so much work during, surely the announcement is easy. But there's a
It's,
lot that goes into it.
I think it's like a few hours after the announcement or like the end of the day. I think for every festival we've announced, like the end of the day, there has been that moment of just kind of everyone being like, you know, like let's go get a beer, just kind of relax. Like everything's done. You can have that big breath of fresh air and just stop stressing about it.
Mm-hmm. God, the life of a promoter. Okay, so this is a fun question. I love asking these questions. So, what was your wow, I can't believe this is my job? Nice story.
So okay, I've got a couple
Excellent.
little things. One is just, a nice little wholesome one, which is kind of just every day when I confirm a new band that I'm excited about. I'm going through Spotify, minding my own business, find this really exciting band, speak to them, get the show confirmed. That's always an amazing feeling. I'm still as excited about booking a show now as when I first did it. And I don't think that will ever change. If it does, I'll be really upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think the biggest one for me was when I realized that the first show I went to in Glasgow was Three Trapped Tigers at the Hug and Pint. And then thinking 3 years on, I am now the booker for that venue. And like, that is my responsibility. It's just a really surreal thought.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, selling out a show with a local band who are doing like their first headline, and you can see from then on there's going to be a trajectory, is also a really exciting point. Like at the start of this year, we had Kubitaru sell out the Hug and Pint, Fleur sell out the Hug and Pint for their first like properly ticketed headline shows. Gala selling out the Hug and Pint, Pleasurehead selling out the Hug and Pint, who are not only like all quite close friends of mine, but also just really exciting talents in Scotland who, for um, being fairly new, are worth like a lot of tickets. The Gala
Mm-hmm.
show alone sold out in, I think it was 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a really exciting one. And then there's been, getting a pep talk from two of the members of Fugazi. That was a really wild moment. Like I got robbed the day before and my flat got broken into. Like we'd had a load of money stolen and a bunch of stuff taken, and I was outside, the back of the venue just having a cigarette, kind of having a little rant to one of my colleagues about it. And then two guys from Fugazi come out and just give me a big pep talk about
Oh,
it and kind of, give me a hug and lift up my spirits. Like, yeah. All very nice moments.
God, and get paid to do this.
Exactly.
Those are some really, really nice stories. I think one of my stories when it comes to that sort of thing, um, it falls into, okay, I wasn't paid for this opportunity, but I was technically working there. So I went down to work at the Great Escape, paid my own money to obviously volunteer for the weekend. And I happened to be working at like the sort of lanyard area for all these industry professionals coming in to get their lanyard. So I had to make sure that printed out, because obviously the ink was still really warm. It didn't run. I put it into the little pouch, give them the lanyard, make sure it was scanned, and
Mhm.
handle
And like had their
everything.
names on it and stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
an important job, I understand, but it's not very glamorous. But we happened to stand in the sort of our little van truck thing was within an area where like BBC Six Music were hosting their sort of live lounges from the
Mhm.
festival. So Steve Lamack was there, and I was already like, oh my
Oh,
god,
really?
that's like my favorite DJ. And round about that time, I was like obsessed with the Districts, like the
Mhm.
band. And I was like, oh yeah, they're playing this festival. Like, it's fine. I spent all this money being here because essentially I get a free ticket to obviously go see them after I finish my shift. This is great. And then they came in to like do a live lounge for BBC Six Music.
Oh, really?
And I just finished my shift with the lanyards. And I just literally stepped at the little van, took a few steps, and went to stand like right in front of the band as they performed, obviously live on air on the
That's
radio.
amazing.
And I was like, yep, I am going to be in this forever.
That's sick.
Obviously I didn't speak to the band, I didn't go on the radio or anything, but I was just there to
Mhm.
witness it, and it just happened random. I didn't know they were going to play this set either. Just they just did.
It's just the
Um,
thing that happens. I mean, I think something that people don't realize about like the music industry as well is it's not like about, the credit or like being involved in it. Most promoters that I know are more than happy to stand right at the back of the room and be as far away from the crowd as possible and just watch it all unfold. Like, I don't know of anyone that would like stand on stage and like, present the band and like get credit and stuff. I think it's all very like background work, which is kind of some of the fun about it as well. Like, you don't need or want the credit. You
no,
just get to see this band doing this amazing thing and all of these people having an amazing time. And that in itself is all that you need to make it worth it.
that's exactly it. So
So,
do you have?
well, you mentioned
Oh,
laminate
go on,
being important.
go on.
When we went down to London, we went to for a Venues Day conference. We went to Warner Music Agency,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you can see it, but it says Daniel Match, not Daniel Mutch.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah, they spelled my name wrong, and that is the only reason I catch that.
Oh wow. I mean, my surname has two Z's in it, so I have no chance. No chance in this industry, to be honest. Oh wow. I mean, you keep your lanyards, like I said. Yeah, I've definitely kept all my sort of lanyards and like little tickets and stuff, and that's the
Yeah,
sort of
it's
fun
always
of it
fun.
as well. So do you have any advice for any young cats that want to get into the music industry and get into doing what you're doing?
Honestly, just do it. Like, speak to all the people around you, even if you don't know, but you have contact to them and you can speak to them and you can get them out for a coffee or get their email address or whatever. Just be a sponge. Soak up as much information as you can from as many people as you can. Ideally, people who do things in like slightly different ways. So you can speak, if you're wanting to get into promotion, you can speak to like a promoter who will do like pop punk shows, but also someone who does like more, I don't know, acoustic nights or whatever. And then try and like get some information from your local promoters as well, whether they run a venue or whether they do larger events or festivals, and just see if anyone is willing to kind of give you some chat. And one of the best things to do as well is trial and error. When you put on a show, you'll know how you feel about it, but you won't really know how the band feels about it, or about how the engineer or the bar manager or, the person who might not even be that interested in music, but, has to work the bar downstairs in the venue, and see what they thought and how, what their opinion of how the show was run, how it was advanced, how it was promoted. If they have an opinion, some people might not and just tell you it was great just to, get you off their back. But there will be a lot of people who will give you a lot of time and as much information as they can if
Mhm.
you're nice to them and you deal with them with respect. I found that sound engineers are particularly a gold mine of information because they don't get any credit. They get treated like trash from bands by and large, unfortunately. A lot of bands have respect, but unfortunately, a sad amount of them don't treat sound engineers with any respect. They're kind of looked down just in general, and they have to deal with all of the stuff that happens on the night. If the rep's busy or the person at the door is busy, the sound engineer has to sort that issue and deal with whoever's kind of got the problem sometimes. So they'll be able to give you like a lot of first-hand information of things they weren't necessarily trained to do, but have kind of picked up on and be able to give you the same kind of tools and the same advice to be able to steer you in the right direction.
Yeah. And I mean, I've never met a not nice sound engineer, to be honest. I always say that they're sound guys. They
Hey,
are. They are.
how
I've
long have
yet
you been
to,
sitting on that joke?
I mean, see, to be honest, I've yet to find someone to disprove me with that theory over my
Yeah,
sort of 7 years of experience. I've never met a not nice sound guy or
I've
gal.
never met a rude sound guy or like an aggressive one, but I've met a lot that just like don't want to speak. And like,
I don't,
you'll come to the band and be like, hey, how's it going? I'm the promoter. And they'll be like, all right, cool, nice to meet you. Like, where's the band? And just don't want to have a chat. And that's, obviously totally fine.
different work methods as well, um,
Exactly.
which is one of those things. Okay, so here is a number of questions. So see if I'm a wee band, I've started my own sort of band and I want to get shows.
Mhm.
How do I get shows? Can I just contact you?
Yeah.
Social media?
So for most venues in Glasgow, at least I know, obviously different parts of Scotland will be different in the way they run. But the Hug and Pint and King Tut's in particular, on our websites, we have areas where you can apply to play. And when you put in your information there, I will get an email. Obviously, not if you do it for King Tut's, their booker will get an email. But if you do it for the Hug, then I'll get an email. With your band information and stuff. And the most important thing is really be available. Not be available in terms of like your availability to play a gig, but being able to find your music or your information mainly. Like that's the hardest thing when you find this like cool new band, but no one looks at their Facebook page and they don't have an email address up. So it's really hard to get in contact with them. And, I've got a lot to do. Sometimes I don't have the time to spend 45 minutes scrolling through social media trying to find a contact for this band. I just have to move on. And yeah, just sending out your music, playing the right gigs. Try to avoid taking every gig that's offered to you, and playing the ones that you feel suit your type of music most, because
Mm-hmm.
that'll be what gets you noticed most. If you're on a bill that you don't quite fit, it won't grab as much attention as being on a bill where like it really grabs the crowd's attention because they're there and in that kind of audience. But
Yeah.
yeah, having the tunes as well is like the most important thing.
Um,
Um, if you've got good songwriting and good music, will find you as well.
yep. And again, it's obviously it doesn't need to be beautifully polished songs finishing
Mhm.
a top of line studio. Just as long as it sounds good, it doesn't sound, absolutely terrible. You'll know from your trained ear from listening to so many bands what will fit, what won't.
For sure.
And
And there's
also,
also, that band that sounds rubbish 2 years ago, but now they've worked on those songs for 2 years and they're absolutely banging.
mhm,
That's always going to happen and those people exist. And with the right support and time, that can happen with a lot of people, hopefully.
we always hope, eh?
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's us. Thank you very much for taking time to talk to me.
Excellent. Thanks very much for asking me to do this.